Well, hello there. Good to be with you again. Should I say good for you to be with me again? Actually, we're not really together, are we? But anyway, let's get started. This weekend marks the passing of former President George Herbert Walker Bush. I believe he was president number 41, served one term from January 20th of 1989 through January 20th of 1993. He was succeeded by President Bill Clinton and preceded by President Ronald Reagan. Only served one term, which really was seen at the time as an extension of the Reagan years. He's probably the first, not probably, he is the first vice president who became president since, I believe, the 20s. It's been a really long time. He also marked his birthday in his later years by jumping out of an airplane, which I could never do. I have a fear of falling. But he did it at 85, and I think he did it again. I don't think he did it at 90. He might have done it at 90. But an amazing accomplishment at any age. So he was married for 73 years. His wife, Barbara Bush, passed away earlier this year in April. And he also has that interesting distinction from most other presidents that his son went on to become president, George Walker Bush. And he was the first, or I should say he was the last president I was not old enough to vote for. Here I am again, giving away my age. But anyway, fine. He was the last president I was too young to vote for. He became, election day was just maybe 2 or 3 months before my 18th birthday. But even though I was just a youngin', I was a fan of Reagan and would have voted for President Bush, the elder. But by the end of his first term, I was disenchanted. Rising fuel costs, that globalist approach he had to leadership. He seemed to be so involved in other things outside the country, and the war in Iraq, and breaking his campaign promise to not raise taxes. Really created a lot of problems, and I was a big fan at the time of Ross Perot, and I think I talked about this previously, who went on to capture probably, again I'm saying probably, but I believe 18% or so of the vote, and he probably could have done a lot better, but Ross Perot kept dropping in and dropping out of the campaign, so he wasn't really reliable. And because of that in and out, and that really weak vice presidential pick that Perot had, Admiral James Stockdale, I decided to vote for Bill Clinton. So I alone was not responsible for George H.W. Bush not going on to serve a second term. But Bill Clinton was, I don't want to speak too much on politics, so let me just really discuss mortality. And I've done this before, and I want to do it again. I just think it's interesting. I'm going to say I believe George H.W. Bush probably now is the longest living president who has died. He was 94 when he died. I like these little stats and facts. They're a lot of fun for me. So I did a little research about presidents and how long they lived. I think it's safe to say George H.W. Bush is the longest living president at the time of his death. All right. And right now, the longest living president is Jimmy Carter. And he is also the president that served longest ago. He served from 1977 through 1981. He is, however, not the president that was serving at the time I was born. That distinction goes to Richard M. Nixon. And Richard M. Nixon is the first president to die during my lifetime. He died in 1994 at the age of 81. And so a few presidents have followed, and they've all died in their 90s. President Ford died in 2006. Ronald Reagan, I think, died maybe in 2002. I'm not sure. I didn't write that down. But both Ford and Reagan were 93 when they died. And now George H.W. Bush was 94. And Jimmy Carter will be at least 94. Now, Jimmy Carter had a little cancer scare back in 2015, and we really haven't heard anything about that since. So hopefully he's doing okay, and he's got several more years of quality to go. But these presidents that have died during my lifetime, aside from Richard Nixon, have all died in their early, even mid-90s. And, no, I would say Ford and Reagan died in the early 90s. I think anything between 0 and 3 is early, anything between 4 and 6 is mid, and anything between 7 and 9 is late. That's how I break it down. So, Bush is not the first president to die in his mid-90s. And Carter will be the next one. Who knows? Maybe he may die in his late 90s. But anyway, interesting, right, that these people serve as president, and they look destroyed when they leave office. All of them. They look horrible. The pressures of the presidency really takes a toll on these men's appearance. And you would think they wouldn't have such a long way to go. But they're doing it. And they make Nixon look young when he died. And 81 is not bad. I mean, I don't know the average age. I believe for women, it was, or it is, again, 76. And men are probably very close to that. Or maybe it's men who are 76. It's another stat I should have looked up before speaking to you. But a lot of men, I don't think, make it into their early or mid-90s. And all these presidents are doing it. So it just goes to show these are people that are coddled in terms of their health. You know, they have, I would assume, the Cadillac of health insurance plans. And I doubt they have any waiting periods to get in to see a doctor. They're very well taken care of. Ronald Reagan was shot, I think, in his first year in office by a person that was obsessed with Jodie Foster and was trying to get her attention. I forget his name, and it doesn't matter. But anyway, Reagan got shot right under the arm, and the bullet lodged, I believe, in his lung. All right, and he was very close to death. He was pushed into the limousine. The limousine sped off. Mr. Reagan was in pain, and they decided to just drive to the hospital, even though at that moment they weren't even aware he had been shot. So when he got to the hospital, he collapsed just trying to get in the door. Um, and he survived and made a speedy recovery. And Ronald Reagan at the time was the oldest living person to be, well, of course it would have to be a living person. Dead people aren't elected to the presidency, but he was the oldest person to ever become president. And that dogged him his 8 years of his presidency. He was often said to be taking naps and not really with it and kind of spaced out, and he was too old to serve. And you know, it's odd that they don't say that about Trump, our current president, who I believe took office during his 70th birthday, because he is now 72, as is George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. They're all 72 now. Barack Obama is now the youngest ex-president, and he's only 57, so that man has a long way to go. I didn't want to talk too much or entirely about the presidents, but I've spent so much time doing it. I don't think I'm going to talk too much about death because it's morbid. Well, let me go ahead and do it, and I reserve the right to cut it out of this recording later. But anyway, we all have to go, you know, and hopefully, you know, even the presidents, but hopefully we all have a long life, you know, a long quality life, and we all make it into our 80s, and you know, hopefully a lot of us into our 90s. Some of us have to go on our 70s, and that's unfortunate. You know, I used to have, and I might have talked about this before as well, but I used to have a fear of death in, I'm going to say it, in my 30s. And I've outgrown it, and I was telling a friend recently that I'm no longer afraid of dying. And he misunderstood what I meant. I'm not saying I'm ready to die or I'm suicidal or anything like that, but I don't have the fear that I used to have. You know, like I said, we all have to go, but now that I'm older and now that I've accomplished a little bit more in my life, I'm at peace with it. You know, I'm not saying I want it to happen. I hope it doesn't, but I feel like I've done some living now. But if I go tomorrow, it's still entirely too soon. You know what I see interesting sometimes? I see people's driver's licenses, and I see that they say that they're organ donors. That, I couldn't do that. I'm like, gosh, what if I'm not really dead and they start cutting me open and just yanking out my organs? You know, I don't think, you know, that the thought of that is just frightening. And they say, well, these things happen after death. But it still scares me. So I'm not an organ donor, and I don't want to be an organ donor. I remember my father died 10 years ago this year, and they called. I was at my mom's house, and the hospital called, or someone associated with the hospital, or someone who knew of his death called and wanted to know if we'd be willing to donate his organs. And I'm like, you're going to have to talk to my mother, and she's not available right now. You know, these are decisions that have to be made quickly. The organs are only good so long post-mortem. So I understand. It is a very awkward conversation to have, but in the end, my mother did not authorize that. And there is one situation where I may decide to become an organ donor, and that is if I myself become an organ recipient. You know, it's only fair. If someone saved my life, I got to be willing to do the same for someone else. You know, so under those circumstances, I will. I really haven't made any kind of funeral arrangements. I'm young. My father hadn't made funeral arrangements. He thought he was going to live a very long life. I didn't think he would, and even told him so, and that wasn't really a very nice thing to do, but it turned out to be somewhat correct, because he did die a few months shy of his 72nd birthday. So I'm hopeful that I can make it into my 70s. You know, I know as we get older, life gets harder, people get more lonely, they have to say goodbye to a lot of people, and that is sad, but we still manage to want to go on living though, don't we? So yeah, I'm not ready to go. I want a lot more time, but yeah, it's a hard conversation to have. As far as burial arrangements, I know that my father was going to be, his remains were going to be just thrown in the river, a river that he liked near his home. And, I was asked what I thought, and I was like, well, whatever you want to do, is what I told the family. And then I decided, no, you know what, I don't like that. I want to be able to know where he is. And so we didn't really have a funeral, but I did get him an urn. When I had saved up enough money to pay for his burial plot, he was buried, and now I know where his remains are. But the idea of these remains just drifting away in the water is just, it's just sad, And, I never even go to the gravesite, but I know that it's there, and that is very comforting. And that's what we have to do with the dearly departed. We have to treat them in a way that that is respectful to them, of course, but also something that helps us cope and heal and deal with bereavement, which is very difficult. But I don't know. I don't know if I want to be buried. I don't know if I want to be cremated. There's just really no good way to go, is there? Really, it's a difficult conversation, but, hopefully I have a long way to go. Won't, suffer any terminal illnesses early in life. But anyway, I don't want to continue harping on this as the conversation has gotten really dark. So I want to thank you for listening this far, despite the content. I want to thank you for watching and agreeing with the things I say, and if you don't agree, then I want you to continue watching until you do. Thank you. We're done. If the picture-in-picture video left you scratching your head, you're not imagining things. That was no mistake. It was inserted on purpose. It was just the subject matter had gotten a little heavy. When that sort of thing happens, I like to lighten the mood. So I thought it might be amusing if, when I started talking about my dying and how I may be disposed of, that I insert a video of a bunch of buzzards pecking at a dead carcass.